Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets and flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brien Schmauch, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Welcome, Couch Coach Nation. We had a wild week one, but we know a little bit more about where these teams are. It's really going to take the whole month of September to get a good sense of what everybody is and what they aren't. But at least now it's not conjecture. We actually got some game film. Tonight, we've got what should be a high-scoring game at 7 o'clock, James Madison at Louisville. I'd expect Louisville to win and cover their 12.5-point spread. And then at 9 o'clock, Boise State's looking to recover from a devastating loss last week. They've got FCS opponent Eastern Washington. AV, how you feeling going into week two?
Feeling great, my man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
glad you mentioned that Boise State game. That was a sneaky good game, like a sneaky big upset. But, it happened on Thursday or Friday afternoon, and it didn't get talked about much. But that makes for an interesting game this weekend with USF and UF.
Absolutely. USF, they've got Florida this week and Miami next week. If they can get one of those games, I think it'd probably put them in the driver's seat for that group of 12 spot that Boise State was pictured by everybody. They're going to be the group of 5 representative, that just like they were last year. But everything's wide open now. Tulane, Navy, any number of teams from the American could slide in there.
Most definitely. And USF does have a great opportunity. I don't know if they'll get either one of those games, but just muddy them up, make it an entertaining game to watch. That would be cool.
Absolutely. So let's get things started with a couple of noon games on Saturday, jumping right in. Illinois at Duke. AV, pop quiz for you. Give me the only stadium east of the Mississippi to host the Rose Bowl.
And that's Duke's home stadium.
That's it, Wallace-Wade Stadium.
Wade, yeah.
Back in 1942, there was fear that the Rose Bowl game could be attacked, and so they moved the game over to the East Coast.
It's hard to imagine, because that's not a big stadium. It's hard to imagine a Rose Bowl there, but long time ago, obviously.
1942. Going back in history, this is only the third ever meeting between these two schools, and they're tied at 1. The first meeting was in 1965. Illinois is ranked 11th in the AP poll, their highest ranking in the AP poll since 2001. Duke's on the outside looking in, but second-year coach Manny Diaz has got them right on the cusp. Illinois, they were really sharp in their opener against Western Illinois. Luke Altmaier was 17 for 21 for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns. They added 209 yards on the ground, so they had a really balanced attack. And let me tell you, Hank Beatty had a 69-yard punt return for a touchdown, and his total yardage on the day broke a 102-year-old record by Red Grange.
Wow.
He also added 108 receiving yards. The Duke offense was equally explosive, totaling 548 yards with 389 in the air. Potential All-American from Illinois, Gabe Akis, had 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. He's going to need to have another big game and put pressure on Tulane transfer Duke quarterback Darian Mensah. And while we're talking about Mensah, it's been reported, the numbers aren't confirmed, but being reported, he signed a 2-year, $8 million NIL deal in the transfer portal, making him one of the highest, if not the highest paid player in college football.
That's amazing. What is the upside for Duke on that? Can they win the ACC? I don't think so, but is that what they're hoping when they spend that kind of money?
I don't think maybe this year, but perhaps next year. I think they're looking to make a big investment in football, and this is proof of that.
Yeah, they're making an investment. It's interesting to spend that kind of money on a quarterback at Duke, though. You would think that money would go to a point guard or someone.
Absolutely. When I look at this game, I think explosive offenses, both teams are going to score. Both quarterbacks are going to throw it up. Illinois, I give them the edge with the ground game and their defense. The defense for Illinois is just a little bit stronger. But again, I'm expecting a shootout. I think this game's in the 40s. Take the over. I've got Illinois 48-42.
One of the things that I respect about Manny Diaz is that he brings tons of blitzes and pressures. I think he's going to give Altmaier some trouble. And I mentioned last week that with Mensa, I believe Duke's going to upset somebody this year. And I'm calling it this week. They're going to upset Illinois. I'm going to say something like 35-31.
Okay.
They're going to slow down Illinois enough, maybe create a turnover. Mensa's going to put up another 3 touchdowns in the air. And I'm calling the upset.
Nice. Okay. Also at noon, we've got Iowa at Iowa State. This is for the Cy Hawk Trophy. This is a series that dates back to 1894. But recently, 11 out of the last 13 games have been decided by 10 points or less. The last 5 all by 1 score. Iowa State does not have home field advantage, though. They're 8-21 at home in this series, and they haven't won at home since 2011. Iowa State's one of the few teams that are 2-0 thanks to their Week 0 game. Rocco Becht, he's a veteran quarterback. He's got an experienced offensive line in front of him. Iowa, in their opener, they rushed for over 300 yards on the ground, and what I was expecting their transfer quarterback, Mark Gronowski, to get the passing game going, he was 8 of 15 for 44 yards. This is a guy at South Dakota State. He won 2 national championships, won the Walter Payton Award, that division's Heisman Trophy, and threw for over 10,000 yards. I expect there to be more passing from him in the Iowa offense. I don't know if it was a case that they didn't want to show much before a rivalry game, a little rust. Maybe he hasn't really gelled yet with those receivers. But for Iowa to get to where they want to go, he's going to have to throw the ball this year. Thankfully, they do have their defensive coordinator, Phil Parker, who seems to shut everybody down. One of the best defensive coordinators in the country. They've got really good special teams. That defense is a senior-laden team. One of the best matchups you'll find anywhere this weekend is going to happen right in the middle. Iowa center Logan Jones versus Iowa State defensive tackle Big Citrus Dominique Orange. What do you like in this game?
Look, it's early in the season. We talked about last week not really knowing what teams have. They rushed for over 300 yards, so that's a good sign. They've got a quarterback we think can throw. That's a good sign. But I don't know what their defense is going to be this year. So all that said, I have watched a little bit of Iowa State in 2 games, and I wasn't super impressed. I'll go with Iowa in a snoozer, 21-17. I think their defense is probably good enough to give Iowa State some problems on offense, and they'll rush the ball and play field position and score enough to win.
I've got Iowa State ranked in the top 15 of the Complete BS poll. Iowa, they're not ranked. Iowa State's at home. But we already said they don't win this game at home. It's defense, it's special teams, it's 1 score, close, low-scoring game. Iowa with the upset, 16-14.
Ooh, nice score.
A lot of field goals in this game. I see Iowa getting the ball down there, but then they stall, kick 3 field goals, get a touchdown in there. There's my 16. Tell me what you think when you see Michigan at Oklahoma. College GameDay is going to be in attendance.
You got to believe that all offseason long, Brent Venables had this game circled because he needs to get off to a good start. You had mentioned in some of the previous episodes that they have a really tough back half of the schedule, and he needs this game in a big way. And I think they prepared for it for 2 months at least. I could be wrong, I'm guessing, but this is an important one. It's at Oklahoma. The homecoming for Sharon Moore gets spoiled. I think John Mateer has success throwing the ball. Bryce Underwood gets a little rattled. The one question I have is, does Oklahoma slow down the big Michigan running game? I think they do, but I don't know that they do. If Michigan can pound it down their throat, then anything can happen. But I still think Mateer gives them a chance to outscore them in any kind of scenario. I'm going to go Oklahoma, fairly comfortable, 31-21.
Okay. Yeah, this is for Oklahoma. This is a must-win game for them. Their last 7 games, the opponents won 70 games last year. It's a new year, but they've got a really tough last 7 games. It's important for them to start out 5-0. This is a must-win game for them. I'll give you my thoughts when we come back later with Michigan legend John Kolesar. But let's see if we can't do a little bit better this week with AV's Book Club. What do you got on tap for us this week?
All right,
And
I got a few picks. Let me pull them up. The first one I'm going to take is going to be a little counterintuitive to you there, BS. It's Army plus the 17.5 over Kansas State. I went back and looked at some of that Army game. They're typical Army. They're moving the ball. They got a hard-to-stop offense. They had 3 turnovers in that game that really lost it for them. I think Kansas State is not above hot garbage dumpster rolling down the street. I don't think they're going to stop Army's offense. Army's going to eat up clock and keep it within 17.5 points. That's my logic on it.
teams, they like to run the ball, so they're going to limit possessions. It might be really hard to get out to a 17.5-point lead in this game.
Yeah, exactly. My second game of the week is SMU -3 over Baylor. We saw what Auburn did to Baylor. SMU, I believe, is better than Auburn. They have a better coach than Auburn. They have a returning quarterback. Baylor is at SMU. I just think a field goal is not enough points. So I'm going SMU, giving the 3 points to Baylor.
I like that play.
Smart.
Kevin Jennings, he's one of those dark horse Heisman contenders that people talked about in the preseason. I don't think that he's going to be a legitimate candidate this year, but their offense is really strong. Rhett Lashley calling the plays there. I think they can put up points, and this has the potential to get out of hand. I'm not saying it will, but if this were to go one way and someone were to win this by 14 to 21 points, it would be SMU.
Next one is Syracuse -6.5 over UConn. Syracuse owns the series going back and forth. They've won I forget how many in a row, but UConn's going into the Dome. It's a tough place to play. Syracuse laying less than a touchdown. I like it. I like it a lot, actually.
Actually, I really like this play. Fran Brown, coach for Syracuse, was asked about the talent gap against Tennessee and his team not having as much talent as Tennessee. And he was defiant in his comments, saying, we have all the players that we need to win and win big. We didn't coach them well enough. It's on us. He took full responsibility for that loss. I think Coach Brown gets after them this week. He's out to send a message that they're going to win a lot of games, and it's going to start this week. I think the 6.5 is a great play. Lay the points. Syracuse has got this one.
Yeah, I agree. I watched the Syracuse-Tennessee game, and it wasn't the blowout the score was. Like, it was pretty close in the third quarter. And Syracuse, I think, had a turnover that allowed them to stretch the lead. But it was a one-score game in the second half, and Tennessee put them away, to their credit, but they hung with them for 3 quarters. Syracuse lost their quarterback, so they're breaking in a new one. But the one they have is a transfer from Notre Dame. They've got transfer receivers from big-time schools. They're not lacking for talent. I think they'll beat UConn fairly handily at home. We talked about this game already. Duke, I like the upset. They're getting 3 points, so take the 3 points, maybe sprinkle a little on the money line. And then I've got Mississippi State plus 6.5 over ASU. Mississippi State's at home. Last year, these two teams played. ASU beat them by 1 touchdown, 7 points. They had Cam Scatterbo run for 297 yards. He's not there anymore. They're not playing at Arizona State this year like they did last year. They're playing at Mississippi State. The cowbells will be ringing. I think that Mississippi State keeps it close enough, maybe even pulls the upset, but I'm taking the 6.5 at home. Night game in the SEC, traveling across country, across time zones for ASU. Put me down for that one, BS.
I'm going to let you stay out on that limb by yourself. We'll
revisit it next week.
My bonus pick, we already talked on one of the academies with Army. I've got the Naval Academy. Navy is minus 21.5 against UAB. Last year, this was 41-18 for Navy at UAB. It's home for Navy this year. UAB beat FCS Alabama State by 10 points in week 1. Navy rolled over VMI. Blake Horvath only played the first half once they had a comfortable 28-0 lead. If he needs to play the entire game, Navy's going to be up big. I love what they do with their offense, and it's a little different. It's not your traditional triple option. Navy's going to score a lot of points in this game, and they're going to win big.
I'm going to tell Trent Dilfer you said that, and he's going to yell at you big time.
That's okay. Trent Dilfer was one of the coaches on our hot seat in that episode. I think this might be the end of the Trent Dilfer tenure at UAB later this season. We'll have to wait and see. But stay tuned. We'll be right back with Michigan legend John Kolesar. Welcome back, Couch Coach Nation. I'm thrilled to have Michigan legend John Kolesar joining us on Complete BS. John is from Westlake, Ohio, where he was a multi-sport star in both football and track. John starred at Michigan from 1985 to 1988 at wide receiver, punt returner, and kick returner. He was named to the All-Big Ten team in 1987 and 1988, and the team MVP in 1988. He was part of 2 Big Ten championship teams and won the Rose Bowl his senior year. He was drafted in the 4th round of the NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills. He returned to Ohio and built a successful career in the business world. His son Caden played safety at Michigan from 2019 to 2023 and was part of the 2023 national champions. Michigan fans probably remember him best as a Buckeye killer for his 77-yard touchdown reception from Jim Harbaugh as a freshman in 1985 and his kickoff return for a touchdown versus Ohio State in 1988. And finally, I don't mean to make you feel old, but I remember watching you in the big house when I was an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. This is an absolute thrill for me to have you on. John, thank you. Welcome to Complete BS.
Well, thanks, Brian. I love to be here. Obviously, feeling old and the gray beard, looking in the camera here. It has gone by pretty quick the last 40 years, and that's just the wink of an eye. But certainly a great experience for me and my family with my son, as well as my father, who played at Michigan in the 50s. So we're a 3-generation family at the University of Michigan and football program.
So starting off with that recruiting process, what schools were you looking at? I'm sure Earl Bruce wanted you at Ohio State. Bo Schembechler got you at Michigan. You mentioned your dad played at Michigan. Give me a little background on how you ended up there.
Yeah, those days, I didn't have all the rating systems or anything like that, but I was recruited pretty much all the Big Ten, MAC schools and things like that on the East Coast, a few West Coast schools. West Coast schools were kind of out because travel for my parents, so they wouldn't get a chance to see me. So I basically kept it regional, and I had a top 5, and you get 5 visits. But my top 5 were Michigan, Ohio State, North Carolina, West Virginia, and Miami, Ohio. And all of those were relative for somebody. Miami, Ohio, my brother was a player, so I went there for him. West Virginia, my coach had asked me to go visit there. North Carolina, they're not a football school, but back in the 80s, they weren't too bad. And that was for me. That was if Michigan didn't give me a scholarship, that was my plan B. Certainly Ohio State, being an Ohio kid and all that, that was on the list, as well as certainly Michigan because of my dad. And the truth be told, the people always ask that question, why did you go to Michigan? You're from Ohio. And I said, well, my dad went to Michigan. I grew up with it. I've got all the paraphernalia and the memories and his teammates, and we've gone up to a couple of games when I was a kid. And the story goes, and it's kind of a neat story because it ties in what those 2 schools are all about. And there's a lot of cross-pollination and with the 2 schools, a lot of similarities. And in this case, he did get a scholarship to Ohio State in the 50s. He played at Menor High School, and the high school football coach at the time said, hey, you know what? We don't know about this Hayes guy. And that was when Woody had just taken the job down at Ohio State. And this high school football coach said, why don't you take a look at Michigan? There's a guy named there, Osterbahn, who's a player coach, was a player, now coach, and they gave him books and tuition, not even a full ride. And what went on from there was they played there for 4 years, and they graduated in 1955, and the rest is history. However, the story goes, well, who was this high school football coach that gave him that bad advice, according to the Ohio people? And ironically enough, it was a guy named Lee Tressel. And Lee, obviously, if you know the last name Tressel, is Jim Tressel's dad. And we grew up in Cleveland area, and Lee Tressel became a coach at Baldwin Wallace College, leading them to a national title in 1978. And we went to a couple of games and got started. I probably saw Jim Tressel play back in the early 70s at BW. So, it all comes full circle, and there's a lot of similarities, and we can get into that in a bit. But
The Michigan-Ohio State, the rivalry, the game, and all the good thing. I was just part of it and happy to be so.
Well, you played a lot as a freshman in 1985. Was there a moment in practice or early in the season where things clicked for you and you knew you could play at this level?
Well, no, because I came in as a running back. So back in those days, and even to this day, Michigan's noted for running the football. And that's what you go to Michigan for, the running back. And I was running back at Westlake. And then I'm going to the freshman orientation, which was 4 days of freshman practice. And I was the only running back, and we ran 2 platoons. So I had to run every single play back and forth. And I was just fried for 3 days and learning the position. I probably made every mistake in the book. But the last half day of practice, they switched positions just for kicks and giggles. Offense guys, defense to offense. And most of the guys, like, I would have went to defensive back. So I'm thinking I'll play defensive back for the day, maybe a safety. Before I go out, Bo pokes his finger into my chest. I'm looking at you, wide receiver. And I said, what? And again, I was fried. My hands were tight. I couldn't run. I was sore. But I did the best I could and basically caught every ball. I mean, literally, it was a little bit magical that happened. And right then and there, they pushed me up to third team wide receiver. And in those days, we ran plays in. And we did signal plays and things like that do today. And so I was basically on the travel squad right off the get-go. And a couple injuries early on, and third game my freshman year, I started and didn't relinquish. And part of the reason is because I blocked. That's my kind of kid. They said, you moved from running back to wide receiver. I said, no, I moved from running back to wide blocker. And all the things that led up to that moment, basically as I was a running back, I was physical. I knew how to block away from the ball and linebackers. So defensive backs were that much easier.
That's remarkable. Michigan's kind of had that history of moving people around. Trip Wellborn was a wide receiver that moved to defensive back. Other guys have been moved positions, but being able to block out there as a wide receiver with Michigan's running game, you got to seal the edge so that Jamie Morris can get free. I love hearing that stuff. So Bo tapped you and said, you're going to be a wide receiver. Tell me a favorite memory or something that has really stuck with you through the years about Coach Schembechler.
Well, no doubt he's a legend, and he's part of that lineage that we kind of speak of, or I speak of at least. And I talk to people about this all the time. He was one of those guys. You can call cradle coaches out of Miami of Ohio, but I always look at it as the I-80 influence, and that's the turnpike. I guess you can go all the way to State College, Pennsylvania, to South Bend, Indiana. And I-80 goes all the way through. And if you take 90 miles north and 90 miles south of that highway, all the great players and coaches and families that live there, coach there, taught there, it's endless. We can go today, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh. These are the guys that have won all the latest national championships. There is a recipe for success, especially in football. And probably it's not a mistake that the National Football League's Hall of Fame is in Canton. And that's right off I-80. And there's stories that you hear out of Massillon, those great little high schools that kids are born with a football in their crib. And there's definitely a lineage that goes on from there. So Coach personified all of that. Those things that, helpful on the football field, but are more helpful in life. Think about the hard work, perseverance, attitude, teamwork, camaraderie, all of those things that translate to success on the field and then translate later in life. Much respect and admiration for the man. And again, that lineage. And he got that quite frankly from Woody and what Woody did at Ohio State. And some of these things are just priceless. And the fact that I got a chance to be part of that, to me, is remarkable.
Growing up in Michigan, my dad was a huge Michigan fan. So Sunday morning, we had to watch Michigan replay. It was must-see TV in our house. My dad would call it the Bo Show, and he always wanted to relive the previous day's games, whether we were there in person at the big house or the game was on the road. So I want to replay one with you here. Take me back to that 1985 Ohio State game, fourth quarter, 77-yard touchdown pass that you get from Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, it was a big one. I try to give credit where credit's due. And, I was the wide receiver. I crossed the goal line. I'm the one that gets the headlines and things like that. But it does take 11. It takes 10 of the guys to put the protection in place and everything else. And that game, it was a cold game. And I remember warming up, it gave me the winter jersey, which had sewn in front pockets. And it was like a heavier nylon. and I was starting to warm up, and I got wet, and the thing started just draping on me. So I asked for our summer jersey, and the summer jersey was a really, really wide stitch hold, nothing much, but it was, the air would just go through it. I remember in the huddle, like third quarter, I'm like shivering because it was so cold. But nonetheless, that was a feisty game. And right before that play, Ohio State threw a fourth down long pass to Chris Carter. The amazing Chris Carter brought it down amongst a couple of Michigan defenders to bring them within 3 points and trying to change the momentum. And there's 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This is 1985, right? This isn't 2-minute offense stuff that they have today. So you're always wondering if you're going to be able to come back. And as a child, when I watched Michigan games, that was an issue. If you were behind with 7 minutes left, you were in trouble because you had to run the ball all the way down the field. And so, needless to say, the ensuing drive, we took the ball back to the 20 at a 3-yard gain for not much, and then it was 2nd and 7. And everyone probably anticipated the run, the conservative Bo Schembechler, but instead he launches, I think the route was 367, check with me, which really meant that Harbaugh is going to check at the line of scrimmage, and he's going to pick pass or pick run or pick left or pick right. And we stayed with the pass, and Ohio State was thrusted to stop the run. And so they went to a man coverage, and William White was the defender. And he kind of sat on my route because earlier in that game, I did a couple of out routes for some first downs. And so he wasn't going to let that happen. So he got caught flat footed and kind of run by him. And Jim got far enough out there and then fell into my hands. And I say fell into my hands because there is a story that I was wearing contacts at the time. And as I was opening and looking back towards the ball, I don't know if anyone wants contact and have wind in their eyes, but I couldn't see it because my contact was flipping up. And so I couldn't half see it. There was a corner, portable lights, it's caught in the lights and all these things. And so it just landed in my hands, and I was always taught to run for the pylon after that, and the rest was history.
That's an amazing story. You couldn't even hardly see the ball.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh, the one throwing it, tell me a little bit about playing with him and his leadership. He's one of those iconic Michigan names, went on to success in the NFL, came back to Michigan as the coach, led them to a national championship. Now he's back in the NFL. Just one of those iconic Michigan names.
Yeah, certainly. And he's part of that lineage, right? So his father, Jack, played at Bowling Green, was born in Perrysburg, right off I-80, right? And so you kind of look at that, and, we had the same upbringing. And the thing about Harbs is that he's a winner, and he's a winner because he worked so hard. He didn't have all the best natural talent. Now, don't get me wrong, he did have talent, but he didn't have the strongest arm coming out of the draft. He did get drafted in the first round, played 15 years in the NFL, a storied career, started getting coaching. His dad was a major influence on that. But I always said, and I got a chance to play at the Bills for a couple of years, and if you ask me what's it like to play for this, play for that, but I would play for Jim Harbaugh in a heartbeat. I had one play left, and he's the guy that's going to take the ball at center. I want to play for him, play with him. And so, and I even told that with my son, I said, you're fortunate to be coached by a team with Jim Harbaugh. And some people criticize him in the news and things like that. They don't know what I know. And the aspect of his success is not surprising. He'll come out of this thing with the Super Bowl win, I'll guarantee you. And then John Harbaugh himself, too. John played at Miami of Ohio. Coincidentally played with my brother. And so, again, go back to lineage, go find out where these coaches learn their crafts, and you'll see a lot of it comes back to the I-80 swap of land.
And, that's that brotherhood of the locker room and your teammates. They're with you forever. Played in 4 Ohio State games, Notre Dame games, Michigan State games. You got these rivalries. And then also the Rose Bowl win over Southern Cal. Is there a win that means more to you, beating Ohio State or getting that Rose Bowl win?
Well, the Rose Bowl was nice. It was the last game my senior year, beating Southern Cal and Michigan having not a lot of success out there. And there's a lot of reasons for that and get into in a bit, but nothing surpasses the game. And those are the days back when we were a Big 2 and Little 8. Basically all those games were kind of warm up to the Ohio State game. Ohio State game is just a different level on emotion, on the mental capacity, and the physical. It's just different. And it will take all of your training from all those weeks of practice and games that you played and the coaching to do your best. And it is, at least for me, and I think some of the other alumni that are part of that game, it is a fraternity, whether you wore scarlet and gray or maize and blue. I think you have the privilege of playing that game. It's something special that lasts a lifetime.
You mentioned, your dad went to Michigan, then you and your son. Talk about seeing your son Caden carry on the Kolesar legacy at Michigan and being able to see him cap it off with that 2023 national championship.
Now, it was just a remarkable run for him in his career. It started in junior high, and at Westlake, we went back to the town and grew up in Westlake, went to Westlake Public Schools, and Westlake just did not have a football program. As a matter of fact, they had to cancel the freshman season. They didn't have enough players to go out. And I said, well, you're going to have to look at a different path. And we opened the door to some parochial schools in the Cleveland area, which was St. Ignatius and St. Edward's. And he chose St. Ed's. And I'm just there trying to manage his decisions and what he wants to do. And I said, listen, you may never play there. I said, St. Ed's, they're going to have the best players in the Cleveland area. So anyway, he was able to take a run, played as a sophomore at St. Ed's, which is unique. Ends up being a starter junior and senior year, was a captain. They win a state championship at St. Ed's. And so what a remarkable ride. Time comes to be recruited. And he got recruited by some MACs and some of the Ivy Leagues and the service academies. He got a couple of walk-on off of some really big D1s. He was a little bit disappointed he didn't get more notoriety. He was first team All-Ohio as a defensive back, which is unheard of. He outdistanced my accomplishments in high school. They won a state championship, first team All-Ohio. And usually that you write your ticket. So for him, he got a call from Jim Harbaugh saying, hey, listen, we can get you in here, but it's going to have to be a gray shirt, which means his scholarship starts in January. And basically, it was a tryout. That's what I kind of told him. I said, well, I don't think I really told him that. I didn't want to burst the bubble, but I said, all right, well, you can go there. I said, you may never play there. The same conversation I had with him when we picked St. Ed's. He goes, well, Dad, I want to try. I said, what father won't bend over backward to get his kid an opportunity to try? And that's what he did. And remarkably so, he lettered as a freshman, and he did quite well, and then pulled off a national title.
So one quick question before we get to the present day and the big game. John, everybody likes to talk about your Mount Rushmore of this or that. I've got mine. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of Michigan wide receivers?
Oh, well, yeah. A couple come to mind right off the get-go. AC, Anthony Carter, number one. I used to emulate him in junior high. We played pick-up football, and I would have two plays, AC left and AC right, and my buddy would throw the ball as hard as he can. I would just run under it because I would fleet of foot back in those days, and so that was our play. Desmond Howard certainly wrote a remarkable talent. He was not just a receiving skill, but return skills as well. And he was also running back in high schools coming out of that. So he had a lot of different skills and moves, and obviously on full display when he played. And then I would say Braylon Edwards, being a legacy himself, his dad Stan playing as fullback, running back in the days. And Braylon did a great job coming in, and he had that remarkable senior year. And his protege game was the Michigan State game where he scored 3 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes to beat Michigan State. The fourth, and I'll do this for the old-timers, well, not so old-timers, but I'm going to say Jimmy Smith, because not so much he prolific collegiate career, but he went on to great fame with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the late 70s.
Okay. And my 4, we actually have 3 of the 4 being the same. Immediately, I started with AC Anthony Carter. He's the best ever at Michigan at a wide receiver position. No disrespect to Desmond Howard, who I would also put on that list. I did have Braylon Edwards. I think he's got virtually every receiving record with the receptions, yards, touchdowns. And then my 4th, I'm not familiar with Jim Smith, so I'd have to go back and take a look at him. But maybe it's my bias in the fact that I saw you play as a kid, but you're my 4th on the Mount Rushmore of Michigan wide receivers.
Well, I do appreciate that shout out. Like I said, I was just happy to don the Maize and blue and to participate anywhere I can. And make no mistake, I was a wide blocker. And so shout out to all my brethren at the wide receiver position at Michigan, but we always look for a good block, and that's as good as your touchdown.
As we bring it to present day, Saturday night in Norman, College GameDay will be there. We've got Michigan at Oklahoma. This is only the second ever meeting of these 2-story programs, the first being the 1976 Orange Bowl won by Oklahoma, 14-6. I look at this game and immediately what jumps out to me is this is a quarterback battle and it's youth versus experience. You've got Michigan's true freshman, Bryce Underwood. He was the #1 recruit in the country last year. He got his first start last week and set a freshman debut record with 251 yards passing and 1 touchdown. On the other side, Oklahoma's got a transfer quarterback. He made his first start for Oklahoma, but he's a veteran quarterback, John Mateer. He threw for 392 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also set a debut record for Oklahoma, breaking a record that Baker Mayfield had. One of the advantages that he has, in addition to having more experience in being a veteran quarterback, is the Oklahoma offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, was his offensive coordinator at Washington State. So Mateer knows this playbook. He knows everything that Arbuckle's wanting to call, where everybody's supposed to be, and that gives him an advantage coming in as a new quarterback with a new program. Michigan showed a strong running game with Alabama transfer Justice Haynes, had 159 yards and 3 touchdowns. Oklahoma, though, they have not shown a really strong running game yet. Their best running option is actually Mateer in getting the quarterback involved in the running game. With Michigan, you've got Sharon Moore, their head coach. He played at Oklahoma. He was a standout offensive lineman. And so he's coming back home for this game. He's going to be missed the next 2 weeks. They've got a self-imposed suspension on Sharon Moore for some incidents a couple years ago. So he's there this weekend, and then he's going to be gone from the program for 2 weeks. How does that play into things? Oklahoma, they want to go fast. They want to sling the ball over the field and get Mateer out running the ball a little bit. If Michigan can slow the game down, limit possessions, and keep Mateer on the sidelines, that's going to help them. Run the ball, churn out those first downs. That's going to be a big difference in this game if they can do that. When Oklahoma's throwing the ball, Michigan's got a cornerback, Jair Hill, who's a true shutdown corner that can eliminate one side of the field for Michigan. And then linebacker Ernest Hausman for Michigan. He's somebody that they can use as a spy for Mateer to see where he's going, try and keep him in the pocket and let that defensive line get home. John, when you look at this game, how are you seeing it?
Yeah, a lot of those storylines that you mentioned certainly comes down to the style of play. You look at Oklahoma and Michigan's storied program, which is surprising to me because they only played once, right? And, Oklahoma dominated that game. Defense kept it close. So that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see 2 storied programs, even though 50, 40 years removed from that 76 game, have some of the same identity. I think quarterback play is going to be a big deal. And for your point, I think that Michigan can control the time of possession, the running game, grind it out. So I'm excited. I'm going to be there for the event. So I love the storylines. You picked out all the top ones, and I think it's going to be a hard-fought game.
Well, John, I know you're not a prediction guy. You had told me that, so I'll go ahead and give the prediction. When I look at this, everything sets up for an Oklahoma win. They're playing at home. They've got the experienced quarterback versus an inexperienced quarterback. That they don't have the distraction of maybe what's going on with the head coach going away next week for 2 weeks. Everything kind of seems to go in their direction, but that's not where I'm seeing it. I see Michigan's balance, running the ball and passing. I see Michigan rally around their team. They did that back in 2023 when there's a lot of stuff churning out in the atmosphere about Michigan and Coach Harbaugh. They rallied around him. They had this us against the world mentality. There's a lot of guys that are still on that team that were on that 2023 team. And I see them being the leaders of this group and saying, we're going to rally around Coach Moore. He's home. This is his alma mater. We're going to go out and get this win for him. And then we'll be without him for the next 2 weeks. Keep Mateer on the sidelines, old Big Ten football, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, pound the ball. I see Michigan in a hard-fought, physical game, close, pulling the upset 30-28.
I like what you're telling me. I'm a big intangible guy, so I'll be looking for all the little things on the possession. Like you said, are we getting to the ball? Are we swarming? Are we keeping the ball in front of us? A good defense will do that.
Well, John, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you again. As I mentioned, I grew up watching you play at the Big House. When you agreed to come on the show, I was giddy as a schoolboy thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk to John Kolesar. It's been a highlight for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And everybody out there in Couch Coach Nation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow Complete BS Pod on X and Instagram. Stay tuned for more next week.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.